Hi and welcome once again to the channel. If you're watching this video, you're probably biased because your opinion will be almost definitely anti-Brexit or have an opinion on the Northern Ireland saga. But I thought it would be a good exercise to understand what's happened to the British media. But for purely reasons of being a little nervous about having some lawsuits lobbed in my direction, I've kept some of the title names under very close watch. So let's get to it, shall we? By the way, I've generally found that in the UK, the financial media tends to give quite a more balanced view of things, not out of any sense of patriotism, but more for the sense that their readers speak with their wallets, and their readers pay generally about 3 times more their annual subscription than they would to the likes of the Express or the Guardian. So if they give an opinion that is based, fundamentally one-sided or therefore more a political narrative than an objective one, they lose subscribers quite quickly. They are forced to report facts, obviously with some small degree of personal opinion added to spice up the article, but their emphasis is primarily based on facts and carries with that a general pragmatic overview. Now, what has become patently obvious is that the pro-Brexit print media is an amalgamation of a litany of illusory and erroneous claims. Some of their examples are plain to see. It's quite embarrassing. Take, for example, some of the statements being made in the direct presence of the G7, not just by Johnson or Raab, but even by Sunak. They were quite misleading. And by using the word misleading, I'm being very, very kind. Sunak announced that everybody had reached a deal on a new universal corporation tax. Nobody reached any deal. They spoke about it. They said, let's try and do that. But he announces it as an accomplishment. This has simply rendered the UK media as an impotent, vacuous assembly of the most inept, lazy, and partisan journalists ever before inflicted on a nation. It is staggering. The UK now sits in direct light of the world's leaders and media. It's front and center of it. And it's been rendered almost a bastion of denial and stupidity, from the ridiculous assertion, take for instance, that the economic austerity and social ills should be laid at the feet of the EU was preposterous, as was the Brexit bus. Now, that may well sell column inches, but it doesn't serve any economic purpose with, people you're going to trade with in the future, because they're laughing at you. But also beyond any doubt is how the world now views British media. Please, let's not forget that not so long ago, much like a lot of things done in the UK, it pioneered the concept of being a source of news and independent news and current affairs whose content could be trusted and it could be depended on to deliver regular and accurate data. Now, but as the world sees that the clandestine, covert exercise by many in the mainstream media have evolved to pursue their own policies and agenda, ladies and gentlemen, the trust has left the building. The misdirection, the lies and the deceit has grown to such an extent that it now matches the highest belfries of the biggest cathedrals in England. But you know what? Those towering granite steeples of self-serving news articles continues to cast its shadow on all who worshipped at that toxic altar. However, what even they in the mainstream media cannot deny is that in just the 40 years of, how bad things were in the EU, workers' rights and standards of living have risen exponentially, despite the terrible strikes of the 70s and 80s. But you know what we can also see? That those in the corridors of power, well, theirs have not. And this vacuum has created a reliance on the generosity of benefactors, which always comes at a price tag that must be paid by the British people. And how do they make sure their money from the benefactor goes up? Well, they keep in the public eye. And if they don't keep in the public eye, the benefits go down. So they are slaves to the media. Now, I like to call this thing like Tyrannosaurus politic, or Tyrannosaurus media politics. It's a new animal. We must first of all recognize that hasn't been a time in history where hierarchy existed without tyranny. It was a key step to the evolution of every economic force. We know from world history that tyranny is, in effect, an axiomatic truth and occurs because of a usurpation by people with power that operate within a vacuum of corruption, because that vacuum is devoid of any sense of moral conscience or acts of selflessness. Now, apart from almost, hereditary rights of the current crop of politicians to extricate themselves from any moral or economic fallout from their decisions, the media industries have been instrumental in contributing much to a politician's apparent immunity to face in any real meaningful way the repercussions of their actions. We only have to look at Rab. I mean, we know that the whole vaccine program, the testing was a joke, and basically he got caught giving a girl a kiss. Boris has had affairs and children, but he's still there because he has the support of the media. Developed economies have effective, though not perfect, mechanism by which such actions can be stopped and such actions can be punished. But the current government have abandoned all of these protocols. They've abandoned the mechanisms of culpability, and this has been supported by the media. Now, today's media companies, in my opinion, are such as the Murdoch Group, have much in common with the megalomaniacs of the late 19th and 20th century in the US, who would do anything to anybody for a deal. Like Henry Frick, the great leader of the Pinkerton detectives. They were real people. And he was the ruthless partner of Carnegie Steel, who decided basically who stays, who goes, who wins, who loses, who lives, who dies, and zero consequences for the company. I mean, he was a real dude. But even the US did see this, which was why Rockefeller's empire was broken up, along with JP Morgan's. The lawmakers, and I mean the politicians, they recognized quite clearly the necessity of independence to ensure prosperity of civil society. But we don't have anything in the UK now to identify the importance of that independence. They recognize the importance of the dangers of monopolistic type economies and the dangers it presented to the people's interests, like the Murdoch control of the glad rags. In short, though those industrialists had lost a connection to the reality on the ground, the politicians had not, and could not, so long as the media was free to voice dissenting opinion. Is that the case now? No. Now I'd ask you to consider this. The British people have been instilled with decades of suspicion of those that walk the halls of power, and justifiably so. Many became fearful of being noticed and risked their opinions being ridiculed, not for the benefit of society, but for the benefit of a media company's agenda. In other words, if you went against anything the media stood for, you were screwed. And the media traditionally are supposed to report news. They're not supposed to make up news. They're supposed to report news in an impartial way. When is the last time that happened? It happens in the financial papers. Because if they skew anything in there, they're going to get called out on it. But not in the Express, the Mail, the normal one. So let's say a nation that as a collective adopts the approach of let's just look after ourselves. And to hell with everybody else. Screw them all. Now, what if that message has been encouraged and cemented over many, many years in every newspaper every week, which is exactly what happened? Is it not your duty, is it not my duty to provide the truth relentlessly to these people, just as much as they've been fed that rubbish for so many years in so many servings? Please think on this one. Are we so concerned with our own existence and that of our own direct family that we cannot afford the time, energy, or financial burden of worrying about your neighbours or your other family members? Now expand that on a national level as one country abandons another for the so-called benefits of nationalism, and you have a recipe for disaster. Yet the policies of the UK's current government, supported by British media, simply ignores this and does not address this fundamental disconnect with reality. It is impossible for social development to grow, let alone prosper, in such a toxic environment of basically mistrust and isolationist ideology. The UK is an export economy. If it doesn't become an export economy, it's dead in the water. It's last man out, switch off the lights. Until such time that social developments take precedence, economic development is impossible. The nation, the people, the policies and their trust will shortly become so fragmented that progress will become an ever-increasing uphill battle, and no amount of jolly rhetoric from Boris Johnson about how well we are all doing is going to do anybody anything. It's not going to help at all. There isn't an economist in the world that would argue against that assertion. So I say this to the bastions of power within the media. May I remind you all that you hold the nation's pride and destiny in your hands. You should not, but you do. So please do not relinquish or stray from that responsibility of addressing the fundamental basic changes of inclusion, both nationally and internationally, that urgently needs to change. Thanks for listening. See you next time.